be seated.
Thank you, Ron. Father, can I show you another set of minutes? These are dated the 16th of December 1993. A copy will be provided to you. And a copy perhaps for the...
You want to tender them?
No, I will tender them.
We'll make them Exhibit 2831. Do we have copies?
Now, Father, you'll see that these are minutes of the meeting of consultors on the 16th of December 1993.
Yes.
Do you see there's reference to minutes of the meeting of consultors and personnel board? Is that right? Is the personnel board different from the consultors?
There was a period of time in which they tried to separate the work of the consultants from the work of appointing priests to particular parishes and looking after their welfare. But it revolved back to the same group, really.
When was that period of time?
Around this time.
Around that time, thank you. Now you'll see that Bishop Mulcairns is presiding.
Yes.
And you're present.
Yes.
And the same consultants as were present a few months earlier.
Yes.
Leaving aside the apology. Now, you'll see towards the end of the first page, under the heading Staffing,
Yes.
it states the meeting then addressed the overall situation of other staffing needs for Christmas, New Year and for January 1994 onwards. And there's reference there to, after due consideration and discussion, the following recommendations were put to the Bishop by the consultors. Do you see that? It's towards the bottom of the page.
Okay, yes. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Now that was typical of the way in which those meetings under Bishop Mulcairns worked.
Yes.
That is, that you considered and discussed recommendations for appointment. That's right?
Yes, yes.
Now, over the second page, there's reference about half of the way down after the placements to moved B. Finnegan. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then seconded B. Ryan.
Yes.
And then carried. Are we to read these minutes that when Bishop Mulcairns was bishop, he would put for consideration and discussion, no, I withdraw that, the consultants would put for consideration and discussion recommendations, and then ultimately the consultants voted upon those placements?
The bishop would have to accept it.
How do we read moved, seconded, carried?
I would read it as saying that's how the consultants agreed that was the best disbursement, if you like, of personnel. And the bishop would have been part of the discussion, the whole discussion as to how they resolved those matters as to who went where. He'd be part of that discussion as well.
But by suggesting, as these minutes do, that there was a mover, a seconder, and then it was carried, suggests that there was some sort of voting or approval process, doesn't it?
I would suggest it's a formality.
Yes, Father, would it be, as you often see, that there's a discussion with everyone, a consensus emerges from the discussion, and then the decision-making process is formalised in the way that we see on this?
By way of as I said, by way of a formality of...
Yes, but nevertheless, the bishop was keen to ensure that the record showed that the formal steps had been taken,
Yes.
including the fact that it was a recommendation that was coming from the consultants, which the bishop could either accept or reject. But I assume by the time you get to it coming forward as a recommendation, everyone knew what the bishop's view was too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this was the way that Bishop Mulcairns dealt with these matters of appointment in meetings?
Yes.
Thank you.
By the way, whose handwriting is the minute?
I don't know whose that is.
You'll see at the end of the meeting, that's Bishop Mulcairn's signature, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, as I recall, the practice was that the minutes would be read and then he would sign and date that he had confirmed them.
Thank you. Now, coming back to 1969, Father, you were ordained as a priest at that time?
August of 1969.
I beg your pardon?
In August of 1969?
And your first appointment was an assistant priest at St Olympia's Parish?
Yes.
Now, when you were an assistant priest from 1969 to, or in fact in 1969, Bishop Mulcairns was then the coadjutor bishop of Ballarat.
Yes.
What's the difference between a coadjutor bishop and the bishop?
The coadjutor, I'm not sure the exact technicalities, but it meant that he had the right of succession, so that when the other bishop retired, he would automatically become the bishop.
And he did so in May 1971, when you were the assistant priest at St
Sounds
Olympia's
about right,
Parish.
yes.
Thank you. What were the living arrangements when you were at that parish?
There were 2 rooms with a common bathroom on one wing. There was
So
a
by
small,
2 rooms, you mean 2 bedrooms?
2 bedrooms.
Yes,
yeah.
sorry, continue.
Then there was a small, kind of like a box room, storage room. Then towards the front of the house, the bishop had his office and a bedroom with an ensuite.
So who lived in that room you've described, or that house that
Box
you've
room?
described?
I
No. Who lived in the whole premises
whole house,
while you were
okay.
there?
Father John Martin was in one of the rooms. Father Bill O'Connell was in another. I was in the so-called, what I call the box room. And Bishop Mulcairns was in the front room.
What were the positions of Father O'Connell and Father Martin?
Well, Father Martin was the administrator of the parish and Father O'Connell was an assistant priest.
And Bishop Mulcairns?
Was nominally the parish priest.
I see.
And I think that he was considered nominally the parish priest because thought to be improper to have a parish priest superior to a bishop.
Yeah. What was the relationship between you as assistant parish priest and the school?
At that stage, I had very little association with the school. I had chaplaincy at what was then known as St Martin's in the Pines, Year 11 and 12 boarding school for girls, which is currently the Damascus College. But I didn't have chaplaincy of the primary schools. There were the 2 primary schools then, the girls' school and the boys' school.
That's right. And was it the case that the chaplaincy of those 2 primary schools was organised by the then parish priest or by someone else?
By the administrator, yes, Father John Martin.
He organised who would be the chaplain?
Look, I can only say I imagine so. That would be normal.
Father Ridsdale was the chaplain from early 72 to 74, wasn't he?
I don't know that for certain.
He was chaplain while you were still there until June 72, wasn't he?
Brother Ridsdale, or Gerard Ridsdale. When did he go there?
He was appointed assistant priest of Ballarat East Parish on 29 January 1972.
Right. It must have been.
So that seems to be an overlap of some 5 or so months.
Yes.
And he was chaplain of the St Olympius Christian Brothers School.
I don't recall that.
No. Assume for the moment that that's the case.
Yes.
The Christian Brothers School was separate from the 2 primary schools you've referred to?
No.
Same?
Same.
It just had different titles?
It was the boys' school and the girls' school, so the Christian Brothers Boys' School, St Olympius. Sorry, which had different titles?
The 2 schools, primary schools you've referred to as St Olympius Boys and St Olympius Girls' School.
Yes.
Was St Olympius Christian Brothers School the same or different from those schools?
It was different.
It was a school that was run by the Christian Brothers?
Yes, owned by the parish and run by the Christian Brothers.
And the 2 primary schools were run by...
I'm sorry, we're getting confused, or I'm getting confused. I'm sorry, I apologise. There were 2 primary schools.
Yes.
One had the principal of a Sister of Mercy, that was the girls' school. The other primary school was St Olympius Boys' School, run by the Christian Brothers. They were the only 2 primary schools.
So a
that belonged
reference
to the parish.
I beg your pardon?
That belonged to the parish.
So
There's another school within the parish boundaries, which was commonly known as Villa Maria, but it's St Francis Xavier Primary School.
So a reference to St Olympius Christian Brothers School should be a reference to the St Olympius Primary School for boys.
For boys, yes.
Who was responsible for appointing a chaplain to that primary school for boys?
I do not know. My imagination would be that it would be the administrator, but I do not know.
Where would you expect the chaplain to live?
He would be one of the priests of the parish, I would expect.
So where would he live as a priest of the parish?
In that presbytery.
In the presbytery you've described?
Yes.
There were 2 priests that you've described in the 2 rooms. There was you in the box room. What other room was there?
I honestly cannot remember Gerard Ridsdale being there.
But a chaplain to the primary school you would expect to stay in the presbytery?
Yes.
If there was room?
Yes.
What if there wasn't room?
Well, I don't think a chaplain would be appointed from outside the parish.
So the presbytery would have to house all of those priests in the parish?
Yes.
The Christian brothers who taught at the school lived separately from the presbytery. As assistant priests, what was your involvement with the boys' school?
None.
Was the parish priest involved in that school?
I can't remember. He would have some administrative responsibilities.
Because the diocese owned the land on which the school was situated, is that right?
The parish owns the land, the diocese holds the title in trust.
See, and the Christian brothers were, as it were, licensed to run the school.
Yes.
Now, at the time that you were assistant priest, there were a number of Christian brothers working in the school, including Brother Edward Dowland, Brother Robert Best, Brother Gerard Leo Fitzgerald. Now, do you remember those at the time you were there?
I remember Robert Best, but not because he was at the school, but because at that time he was also on the parish council. And I remember Brother Fitzgerald, who was a much older man.
Did you socialise with the Christian brothers?
No, not at all.
When you say not at all, why is that?
It wasn't the way.
It wasn't the way.
Yeah.
The order and the diocesan priests were quite separate.
Yes.
Now, you subsequently found out, didn't you, that starting with Dowland, he was convicted of offences against children during the time he was working in that parish?
Subsequently, yes.
He was convicted in 1996 on the first occasion. When did you find that out?
Now, I've no idea.
Do you recall that it was a matter that was discussed within the church when he was charged?
I don't recall that.
You don't?
No.
Do you remember now your reaction when you found out that he had been charged and or convicted?
Not specifically.
It would have come as a shock to you, wouldn't it?
Oh,
that you were assistant priest.
It's
when
a
there
shock
was
when anyone is accused and convicted of.
But you don't now recall when you first became aware and your reaction to a brother who was teaching at a school in your parish.
No, I don't recall that. I don't recall what my reaction was.
What about when Brother Best was convicted in the same year?
I was more shocked about that because I knew Brother Best. I didn't know Dowland at all.
When did you hear about Brother Best?
I assume when he was convicted, when he was sent to trial. But I don't know. I don't know specifically.
During the time that you were assistant priest, did you hear about any rumours about Dowland or Best?
No, none whatsoever.
No complaints?
No.
What about Brother Fitzgerald?
Brother Fitzgerald, I thought at the time, was pretty much idolised.
So you didn't receive any rumours or complaints against
not
him?
at all.
What about Father Ridsdale?
I was unaware of anything at that time.
Now, by 1996, you had Father Ridsdale convicted on 2 separate occasions. You had Brother Dowland convicted on 1 occasion, and you had Brother Best convicted on the first occasion. You accept that?
Yes.
Did you become aware of Father Ridsdale's offending before he was charged?
No.
Is it the case that you first became aware of his offending on the day that his charges were first heard in court?
Yes.
And that's when you accompanied him?
Yes.
And you accompanied him to court without knowing the charges he was facing?
Yes.
That seems preposterous now,
Yes.
doesn't it, Father?
It does.
That you didn't make any inquiry about why a father was before the civil courts.
I know how it looks, but I'm saying I did not know.
Why didn't you ask?
Well, if someone could explain that to me now, I'd be a happier person, but I just took it that he needed help and I was going to give it.
You just assumed that whatever the civil charge was, or did you know it was a civil or criminal charge?
No, I didn't know either. He put it to me to assist him on a minor matter.
So you didn't know if it was criminal or civil?
No.
You didn't even ask whether he was there for a criminal matter or because he had a speeding fine or the like?
No.
Is it the case you didn't ask because your view was anything a priest did in those days should be protected so as to protect the reputation of the church?
No, it was not about protection. It was simply he asked if I could give him help and I said yes.
Well, when you say help, he wanted you to say something positive about his character.
Yes.
How could you agree to saying something positive about his character when you did not know the deficiencies in his character which had come about by the charge?
Would you repeat that again, please?
How could you agree to saying something positive about his character when you did not know the deficiencies in his character which had come about by the charge?
Because I took him at his word that it was a minor matter or a small matter that he was going to court for. And up until that time, I have to confess that in certain areas I had some admiration for him.
Why?
For his ability. Well, he had abilities in adult education. And I even, and this does sound preposterous, but I even had admiration for what he did for youth.
Because he spent so much time around children and boys?
No, that I had... I had occasion to visit.
No, come on.
I had occasion
I'm
to
sorry.
visit.
It would be much better if we have no interjections from the audience. Witness should be able to give his evidence without interruption. Yes.
I had occasion to visit him, and I saw in his room, in the front room, the lounge room, a small billiard table and a TV screen that you could play games and so forth on. And asked him about it. He said, "I was, for the young people of the parish." And I thought, what a good idea. Why don't I do something like that? Now, fortunately, I didn't. When the trial came up and I started to look back and I began to realise what they were there for.
They were a trap, weren't they?
Yes.
They were a trap for young children to come so he could molest them.
Yes. But at the time I thought, what a good idea to engage the young people of the parish in that way. When I heard the charges of the trial, I looked back and I thought, well, I was horrified that that's what they were there for.
But you didn't notice anything while you were there?
No, not at all.
Coming back to the court appearance, was that an appearance where you understood Ridsdale was pleading guilty?
I can't recall that.
When you heard the charges read out, what did you think?
I was aghast. I was shocked. I didn't know what to feel or think or do.
Well, you could have just walked out, couldn't you?
Well, I could have.
Why didn't you just say to him, "I'm appalled and horrified about the charges that are against you, and I'll have no part of it, of them or you"?
Probably intimidated by being in the court.
Suggesting that your intimidation by being in a court overrode your feelings that you've now given evidence about of understanding the charges that Ridsdale was facing.
No, it didn't overcome my feelings at all.
Well, you stayed and gave evidence, didn't you, on his behalf?
I did.
Notwithstanding that you knew what he had been charged with.
That's correct.
And you did so in order to protect ultimately the name of the church.
No, not at all.
Well, to protect his reputation.
Not to protect anyone's reputation.
Then
I did what I was asked to go and do, which was to state a character reference. So when I stated what I thought was a virtue in him, as I reflected, it became clear that it was, in fact, part of his modus operandi, if you like.
When you say I did what I was asked to go and do, what you were asked to do was to go and support Ridsdale in what you understood to be a minor matter in court.
Yes.
Once you got to court, you realised it wasn't a minor matter, didn't you?
Yes.
You realised that it was in fact horrendous crimes that he was being charged with.
Yes.
Why didn't you just turn around and walk away?
Well, I don't know.
Well, you're the only one who does, Father.
Well, I don't know.
You understand that that was an option open to you?
No, I didn't.
It wasn't an option?
No, because I was in the court process and I believed that I had to follow through with that. I didn't know that I could get up and walk out of the court.
Well, you could have changed the character testimony you gave, couldn't you, having understood what he was facing?
Well, I was probably much more limited in what I said.
Then you would have. Is that what you're saying?
Pardon? Yes, then I would have.
But what you said was favourable to him.
What I said was that in my experience, when he went to a parish, he sought out families that were in need. Subsequently, I realised that that was pretty much part of a pattern, but at that stage I had no idea of that. And that was true.
But it wasn't something that you gave thought to at the time you were there, having heard the charges?
No.
Well, it's possible, isn't it, that you could have heard the charges, thought about what you were going to say and realised within the space of several minutes that in fact what you were going to say about him may well have been the circumstances in which he committed the offences.
Repeat that, please.
It's possible, isn't it, that you could have heard the charges being read out, thought about what you were going to say on his behalf, and realised within the space of several minutes that what you were going to say may well have been the circumstances in which the offences were committed.
It's possible.
But you didn't think that?
No.
But subsequently you did?
Yes.
Have you been in that position before or since where you've given character evidence on behalf of a priest who's been...
No.
Have you been asked?
No.
Now, coming back to your time at St Alypius, you have given evidence about the pool table and the various games in the...
Not at St Alypius.
That wasn't at St Alypius?
No.
Where was that?
That was in Mortlake.
I see. Well, we'll come to Mortlake. Now, Father Morey was appointed to the St Patrick's Cathedral in 1971 at Ballarat.
Yes.
Did you know him?
I did know him, yes.
What was his role was in the cathedral. How did that fit in with your role as assistant priest?
It didn't make... There wasn't the same connection. They were in separate parishes. He was at the cathedral. In what year, I'm sorry?
He was in the Diocese of Ballarat at St Patrick's Cathedral.
Yes.
And you were the assistant parish priest at St Alypius.
Yes.
Was there any connection?
No.
Thank you. Now, in 73, you were appointed to the position of secretary to Bishop Malkerns.
Yes.
Was that a personal appointment made by the bishop?
Yes.
Did you apply for it?
No.
And you knew him because he was
Because
living...
we've been together at St Alypius.
Now, you've said that as part of your role as secretary, it was to attend the consultors' committees meetings and take the minutes?
Yes.
Now, if I can show you what's tab 9 of the tender bundle. What's the exhibit number? 28.1. Now, there's a redacted version that's in the bundle. I have an unredacted version, Your Honour, which I'll refer to and provide copies of.
You want this to come into evidence as an unredacted version?
I do, Your Honour.
Well, we should
If
mark
anyone
it
wishes
separately as Exhibit 2832.
Is that your handwriting, Father?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you believe so, or do you know it to be the case?
Yeah, I'll accept that that's my handwriting.
Well, your job was to take the minutes, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you took the minutes in writing, didn't you?
Yes.
And then presumably you wrote them afterwards so that they were coherent. Is that right?
I think I wrote them directly into the book, but I couldn't be certain about that.
Thank you. Now, you see that those minutes refer to the Diocesan Council meeting at the top.
Top, yes.
Is that a meeting which included the consultors?
Sorry, these are minutes of diocesan council meeting, not of...
I understand that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It says the Diocesan Council meeting.
So your question was again,
It
please?
includes the consultors?
Now, I'm not sure whether it included all the consultants or not.
Well, have a look at who's present. You've got Bishop Malkerns,
Yes.
Monsignor McInerney,
Yes.
J. O'Brien, W. McMahon, Al Fiscalini.
Yes,
They're all the consultors at the time, weren't they?
they are.
Were they also member of the council?
I'm sorry, but this confuses me because I would have thought that diocesan council was something different.
Well, if you turn to the first paragraph, do you see there's reference there to Bishop Mulkern's announcing that a father intended to retire?
Yes. Excuse me, but I would suggest that I've put a misnomer on this. This is the work of the consultants.
I beg your pardon?
I said the minutes here are the work of the consultants.
Well, that's what I was asking you,
Yes.
Father.
Yeah.
It's called the Diocesan Council meeting.
I'd say that I've made a mistake in
So it's
recording it.
Thank you. So it's effectively the consultants' meeting
Yes.
on the 12th of September
I would say
1973.
so, yes.
Well, if I take you through the detail of it, you'll accept, no doubt, Father, that the matters being discussed are matters routinely discussed by the consultants.
Yes.
So paragraph 1 refers to the intention of a priest to retire and the need to replace that priest.
Yes.
And that Father Flanagan was next in line for a parish, and that he'd agreed, if the council approved, to stay on in Maryborough in the role of administrator. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, what Bishop Mulkerns was putting to the meeting was that he wanted the approval of the consultors to what was proposed in respect of Father Flanagan, and that Father Flanagan's appointment was approved by the consultors. That's right.
Yes.
So it was the case in 1973 that Bishop Mulkerns sought the approval of the consultors to an appointment.
Yes.
And you recorded that as well as the
Yes.
approval. Now, the second paragraph, there's the heading correspondence and letter from Father Ridsdale applying for position as parish priest in Port Fairy, which parish becomes vacant through the retirement of the current father. Do you see that?
Yeah, yes.
Now, that correspondence is referred to, and then over the page there's reference to appointments,
Yes.
and there's reference to Ridsdale being appointed to Apollo Bay.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, is it the case that when you were Bishop's secretary that, as you've indicated earlier, under Bishop Mulkern's day, that there would be a discussion about who should be appointed to a particular parish? Do you recollect now what happened at this meeting?
No.
You've got no reason to doubt that that usual practice applied?
No reason to doubt, no.
Now, you see that the correspondence was that he applied for a position in Port Fairy and then he was appointed to Apollo Bay
Yes.
and somebody else was appointed to Port Fairy.
Yes.
Now, what does that tell you about
It
what
tells
happened?
me that Father Canary was senior to Jerry Ridsdale.
Canary being the priest.
Canary is the priest who was appointed to Port Fairy, so he had been given preference to Ridsdale on the basis of priority, if no other seniority.
And you would expect at that meeting that anything the bishop knew about Father Ridsdale and anything that any of those present at the meeting knew about Father Ridsdale would have been a matter of discussion.
From my present perspective, I would expect that. Yeah.
But you don't now recall what happened?
No, not at all.
But you've got no reason to believe that anything different from the usual process followed? Now, having looked at the minutes in some more detail, Father, do you accept that it's your handwriting?
Yes, I do. I was looking at the printing and the appointments, but I think it's mine.
Well, let me show you some other minutes. These are also in the tender bundle, Exhibit 28.1. Now, I can draw your attention to tab 11. Now, these are the minutes for the 16th of January 1976.
Yes.
Now, you were still the Bishop's Secretary in 1976, weren't you? Yes?
Yes.
Now, is that your handwriting of these minutes?
Yes.
And you'll see there it lists who were present at the meeting.
Yes.
And even though it's not described as anything other than a meeting, having looked at those minutes, that's the meeting of the consultors.
Yes.
Now, do you see the first full paragraph? Says after. Can you read that section?
Stressing again.
I beg your pardon, stressing. After stressing again the confidentiality of all matters dealt with in our consultors' meetings, Bishop Mulcairns announced that some matters had arisen in the diocese which might make it advisable to delay making many appointments. At this stage, moves should be kept to a minimum.
Yes, I see that.
Do you have any recollection of that meeting?
No.
You would expect, following the usual practice under Bishop Mulcairns, that he would have explained what he meant by that and you would have recorded the outcome. Is that right?
What he meant by the confidentiality?
Yes.
I would expect that, yes.
Was it commonplace for the Bishop to stress the confidentiality of consultors' meetings?
No, that's a bit exceptional.
So this tells us that something rather extraordinary was happening, does it?
It would indicate that, I think.
Over the second page, there's reference to parish priests.
Yes.
And there's reference to Inglewood.
Yes.
Then there's reference to Bungaree.
Yes.
And against Bungaree is J. Ridsdale, brackets, temporary appointment until end February.
Yes.
Now, was it common to have temporary appointments without recording the need for the temporary appointment?
I think so.
Now, Ridsdale had been at Apollo Bay and you were present as secretary at the meeting where he was appointed to Apollo Bay,
Yes.
having asked for Port Fairy.
That's right. Yes.
And is it the case that having been appointed as the parish priest at Apollo Bay, he could be there for as long as he wished?
Yes.
And one of the reasons that he might be moved is because of his conduct as a parish priest.
One could speculate that.
I beg your pardon?
One could speculate that.
Well, I'm not asking you to speculate. Is it the case in your experience with Bishop Mulcairns as bishop that a priest could be moved or would be moved when he is not sought to do so because of his conduct?
Yes.
And indeed, at these meetings, the conduct of priests was discussed.
Can't remember it being discussed in detail anyway.
Well, if part of the role of the meeting was to advise on the appointment of priests to parishes, it must have been discussed.
Sometimes Bishop Mulcairns might simply say that he needed to do something without necessarily giving his reasons.
Well, having looked at the number of minutes that we have, and particularly those where you were a consultor, it was the case that discussions were held and reasons were given from time to time.
Yes.
and the expectation would be that reasons were given, notwithstanding that the minutes may not record those reasons.
Yes.
And therefore, having looked at the reference to confidentiality, you would expect, wouldn't you, that reasons would have been given, but you, in taking the minutes, didn't record the lengthy discussion, only the outcome.
That would appear to be the case from here, yes.
And that would be your practice in taking minutes, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You wouldn't generally record the discussion?
No, it wouldn't be. It was more just to record the outcomes.
But when we look at this minute, you told us that it was unusual for the bishop to stress confidentiality.
Yes.
It would logically follow from that he was going to tell you things that needed to be kept confidential. Do you agree?
Yes.
And in relation to what those matters might have been in January 1976, having regard to Ridsdale's movement and short appointment, what do you think the bishop might have been talking to you about?
Given the what we now know of his life, it may well have been that he was talking about some sort of sexual abuse issue, but I couldn't say that for certain at this point. But I would speculate that.
Well, when you're told, or when there's a stress on confidentiality,
Yes.
Which you accept means that you were told things that were to be kept confidential, can you think of anything else at this time that you might have been told about?
I can only remember one other occasion in which the bishop stressed the confidentiality, and that was when a priest was about to leave and get married. That was the only other time that I heard him remind the consultors, and I wasn't a consultant at the time, but I heard him remind them of their oath of confidentiality.
Well, you've recorded the bishop announced that some matters had arisen in the diocese. Some matters had arisen in the diocese, so talking about more than one matter, which might make it advisable to delay making many appointments at this stage.
Yes.
Now, given the need for confidentiality about this, can you think of anything else other than sexual transgression which you would have talked about at that meeting?
No.
Was it ordinarily the case that appointments of assistant priests or priests were made conditional upon some matter or another in relation to the parish or the priest?
Would you mind repeating that, please?
Was it ordinarily the case that appointments of assistant priests or priests were made conditional upon some aspect of the parish or the priest?
There could be occasion in which that was conditional. For instance, management of money might be an issue, that if there was a failing there somewhere, that the person appointed to another parish might be appointed there conditionally, or, as the word is used, as the administrator, as a safeguard in case that happened again, he could be removed. But if he was appointed as parish priest, it'd be difficult to remove him.
If the appointment was conditional in your time as secretary and taker of minutes of these meetings, would you record the condition upon which they were appointed?
Not the condition.
No?
No.
But there'd be discussion about it?
Probably, yes.
Would you expect the condition to be recorded on the document that records where the parish priest has been? You understand what I mean by that?
No, not really.
Each priest, after ordination, has...
File.
I beg your pardon?
Has a file.
Yes, which sets out...
Yeah, I think I would.
You'd expect it to be on that
I think
place.
I would expect that.
Thank you.
Ms Furness, the crosses on this copy of the document, are they on the original?
That's the only copy I've been given. I can't say. It certainly wasn't done within the Royal Commission. As I understand it, it was provided with those marks. It was produced by the Council of the Truth, Justice and Healing.
With the crosses on it?
I beg your pardon?
With the crosses on it?
Yes. with all the marks that you see on it.
Father, can you help us there?
No, I saw them on another document, crosses like that, but I've no idea where they arose from.
Do we have the original of the document?
Well, this is the document that was produced in
No,
this.
yeah, but does anyone here have the original of this document?
I'd be very surprised if the Royal Commission did, but perhaps others could speak on their behalf.
I'm looking at the others.
Yes, I assumed you were, Your Honour.
I'm told, certainly not here, I don't know if there is an original in the sense that Your Honour means.
Well, I think we should ensure that we look at the original.
Yes, by all means.
And I assume it's in the possession of those instructing you.
Well, if it's, and I don't want to cut across things, but if it's a book, it may be that the book is somewhere in the diocese, but I'll make inquiries.
Thank you.
There are other documents within Exhibit 2801 that have similar markings. Most particularly, they seem to highlight in one form or another Ridsdale, and it may be they're contained in the same book or not, but Your Honour might wish to see the originals of all documents which are marked in that way.
Yeah, well, we'd like to find out how they came to be on the document.
Now, if I can turn your attention to the next document, which is document tab 12, which you'll see up on your screen. If you need a hard copy, by all means, we can help you with that. Just before we go to that, come back to tab 11. Now, Bungaree was a parish, wasn't it?
Yes.
And his appointment was as a parish priest.
Well, it says a temporary appointment, so it couldn't have been parish priest.
The heading is parish priest, isn't it?
It is.
It doesn't say that he's appointed as an assistant priest.
No, it wouldn't. No.
And you see further down, somebody was appointed as an assistant priest to Swan Hill.
Yes.
And you see also that there was a priest appointed to Inglewood.
Yes.
Now, if we're to have regard to Ridsdale's movements as recorded in his file, there's, and this is on tab 1, if we could have that on the screen. If we go down a bit further, we just move up a bit. You see there's references to when he was an assistant priest at Ballarat North, Mildura, Swan Hill, Warrnambool, Ballarat East. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then Horsham refers to a much later date in time, 1986. And then if you go back to administrator or parish priest, which is this heading underneath, it refers to Apollo Bay.
Yes.
And then Inglewood. And then Edenhope.
Yes.
There's no reference.
Edenhope ADM.
And that means administrator.
Yes.
There isn't reference to the 6 weeks that he was at Bungaree Parish, is there?
No.
Now, if we go to tab 109, you can just stop there. Father, you understand that the Diocese of Ballarat was at relevant times insured by Catholic Church Insurances?
Yes.
And do you also understand that Catholic Church Insurances from time to time when they received claims covered by the policy, they'd conduct interviews with people that they believed could assist them in determining the facts behind the claims. You aware of that?
No, not specifically at all.
I
I didn't know the procedures at all.
Can you assume that the document on the screen is an interview with Bishop Mulcairns on the 1st of June 1995?
I'll assume that, yes.
And then if we can turn to page 139, and that's by reference to the ringtail number on the top. Now, if we can just scroll down a little. Yeah, thank you. Just back up a bit. Yeah, stop there if you could. Do you see the second answer on the screen says, well, we shifted him from Inglewood until there was word that it was responsible to put him back in a parish. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, do you recall any discussions with Bishop Mulcairns about why he was moved, that is, Ridsdale was moved from Inglewood?
No.
But you would have expected in the meeting where he was moved from Inglewood to a temporary position at Bungaree that the bishop would have explained his reasons for doing so?
Would expect so, yes.
And you wouldn't ordinarily record them in the minutes because that wasn't your practice?
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, if we can come back to tab 12. Do you see these are minutes of the 18th of March 76? And that's your handwriting?
Yes.
These are the minutes of a consultors committee?
Yes.
And you see the first matter raised by the bishop was that Leo Fiscalini was the new Vicar General?
Yes.
And then if we can turn over the page. And there was at the top there a motion of welcome for Monsignor Fiscalini.
Yes.
And then in the column to the left of the page it says moves.
Yes.
Now the second item is Eden Hope.
Yes.
Gerald Ridsdale.
Yeah.
Dash pro tem.
Yes.
What does pro tem mean?
For the time being.
You would expect that that Bishop Mulcairns would have explained firstly why Gerald Ridsdale was moving from where he was to Eden Hope. Is that
I
right?
would expect so, yes.
And why it was a temporary position.
Yes.
But you don't now recall what he said.
No.
And again, I take it you're not responsible for the crosses that appear there.
No.
And down towards the end of the page, within that column, is Bishop Mulcairns' signature.
Sorry, I haven't got it on the screen.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Perhaps if we can scroll up.
Yes, there it is.
And that's typically what he did,
Yes.
approving the minutes.
Yes.
Now, if we can turn over to tab 13.
Father, when the attendees are set out, are they set out in seniority?
No, I don't think so.
Is it just random, is
Looked
it?
around the room and wrote them down.
Random.
Now, tab 13, again, minutes of the consultors meeting.
Yes.
And that's the 19th of July, 77. And you set out there the attendees.
Yes.
Now, the attendees have changed from the previous meeting. That is, the consultors
Yes.
have changed. And so Bishop Mulcairns is there. Monsignor Fiscalini, who was recently appointed Vicar General. G. Pell, who you understand to be Father Pell.
Yes.
Frank Madden.
Yes.
J. Mackenzie.
F. Mackenzie.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah. F. Mackenzie.
I beg your pardon, F.
Frank.
Mackenzie. K. Arundel.
Yes.
And
D. Torpey.
who was D. Torpey?
He was a priest in the diocese at that time.
Was he a psychologist?
Yes.
Was he a psychologist at the time he became a priest?
No, I think it was subsequent, but I wouldn't be certain. But I think it was post-ordination study, I think.
Are you aware that subsequent to this, he's been used from time to time to counsel priests?
Yes.
And are you aware of whether there was any particular area of expertise he had in counselling priests?
No.
Now, if we can turn over to the page, it has 131 at the top. You can just scroll up. And again, the underlining and the crosses are not made by you.
No, I'm sorry, no.
This is a reference to Father Ridsdale was formally appointed as parish priest of Edenhope,
Yes.
and this original appointment was as an administrator, and he should have been confirmed as parish priest on the 14th of January that year. Now, an appointment as an administrator means what?
The administrator functions as a parish priest but doesn't have right of tenure, so the appointment is sometimes made in order to make it feasible or possible to move that person from one parish to another. Like if I'm appointed parish priest, I have the right of tenure. They can't move me without my agreement. If I'm appointed administrator, it can be for a limited period of time and I can be moved even if I say I want to stay here.
So the position of administrator can be used to see whether a priest should have a tenured position later on.
Yes.
It could be a period of probation, for want of a better term.
That sort of thing.
It has been used in your experience
Yes.
in this period.
Yes.
If it was the case that it was used in such a way, you would expect, wouldn't you, for Bishop Mulcairns to explain to the consultors why he was being appointed as an administrator?
Yes.
Because, in fact, he'd been a parish priest before.
Yes.
So it was an unusual step to make him an administrator, wasn't it?
Yes, but not unheard of.
Now, underneath there it says Bishop Mulcairns is to write to Father Ridsdale. And was that a common approach to informing priests of their appointment, or was it unusual?
Well, generally we were informed by letter, but by telephone call, followed by a formal letter of appointment.
So when you say we, when it applied to you, that's what happened?
A priest who had been appointed
Yes.
to a parish.
Thank you. Now, if we can just turn to tab 14. Now, again, these are minutes of the consultors' meeting, dated the 16th of August 1978.
Yes.
And that's your handwriting.
Yes.
And it sets out there who was present. And it's some but not all of those who were present at the previous meeting. That's right.
Yes.
So missing was Father Pell and Father Madden.
Yes.
And is it the case that from time to time the consultants didn't attend all the meetings?
Yes.
And that was not unusual.
No.
But if they didn't attend the meetings, they would receive the meeting minutes from the meeting they didn't attend?
I don't think they would receive the detailed minutes. I think they would, as with any other priest in the diocese, receive the outcomes in terms of what appointments have been made.
So if they didn't attend a meeting, notwithstanding they were a consultor,
yes,
they wouldn't routinely receive the minutes of the meeting they didn't attend?
I don't believe so.
However, if they attended a subsequent meeting and the previous meetings were approved at the subsequent meeting, they would then have access to the previous meetings?
Yes.
Now, this is a meeting of the 16th of August 1978, and if we go to page 3, again there's crosses that I take, and the underlining I take wasn't marks that you made when you did the minutes. No. Now, this says, letter from Father G. Widesdale to say that he has been invited to be a mentor of the salary, member of the Salary Review Board of CECV.
Yes.
What's the CECV?
Catholic Education Commission of Victoria.
That was a matter that had to be approved by the consultors, was it?
I'm not sure it had to be approved. It was certainly a matter of interest.
So approval was given,
yes,
and it was moved and seconded. Do you see that in the next couple of lines?
Yes.
Now, the next line is G. Ridsdale also foreshadowed possible interest in a more central parish in the January moves.
Yes.
Now, the reference to January moves means what in light of the priests having tenure?
For a long time, the general moves in the diocese were made in the month of January. The priests would have their retreat in January, followed by a consultors' meeting, and then the moves would be made for the rest of the year.
The retreats would be attended by whom?
In those days, I think everyone. Every priest, yeah.
Every priest within the diocese?
Yes.
What was discussed at the retreats?
Oh, they were spiritual retreats in which the retreat master would give a series of talks or reflections, and we'd be sort of sent off in silence to reflect on them, to think about them, pray about them. They were to do with our spiritual well-being and growth.
There must have been occasions during the retreat where you'd sit about and eat and chat with each other.
Yes, there were, yes.
And who was going where would be a matter of discussion, wouldn't it?
Only if someone had let it be known that he was interested in going to a particular parish, I think.
Unusual moves would be discussed, such as someone leaving before one would have expected their time to be up.
Yes, if that had happened before the retreat started.
And the retreats were annual.
Yes.
When you refer to the retreat master, who was that?
Oh, it could be different person each year.
Were you ever a retreat master?
No. No, they were usually priests from a religious order, sometimes from the Redemptorists or the Missions of the Sacred Heart, or the Redemptorists, as I said.
Christian brothers?
No.
They weren't part of it?
No.
Now, coming back to the minute that's on the screen, I take it, given your evidence about usual practice, that there would have been a discussion as to why he might want to move?
Yes.
And whether it was the right thing to think him suitable for a more central parish?
Yes.
What would you understand central to be in relation to the diocese?
Well, if somewhere around the Ballarat area, my suspicion is that appointment to the CECV would have involved travel to Melbourne, and so therefore to seek somewhere closer to the centre of the diocese, or say around Ballarat, there would make life easier.
Would it be a more coveted parish to be central?
Yes,
You'd expect there to be competition for the appointment
Depending on the parish.
if it was central?
No, not necessarily the central. Like some parishes are better equipped and functioning better than others, and so they might sort of say, well, that'd be a good parish to succeed someone in. Others would see another parish as a real challenge to build it up, a parish that had been run down. Yeah.
We can have tab 15 on the screen. Now you see these are the minutes of the consultants' meeting on the 25th of September 1979.
Yes.
And again, that's your handwriting. No. And you've recorded Bishop Mulkern's, Monsignor Fiskerling.
Yes,
sorry, no, this is not my handwriting.
It's a no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Whose handwriting is this? I beg your pardon?
I don't know. I
You
don't know.
You were the Bishop's secretary until 1978?
Yes, 73.
Who took over after you?
Can't remember whether it was Brian Finnegan or Brian McDermott.
I noticed the time, you're on.
Very well, we'll take lunch.
All stand.